Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Lockhart Wellness Solutions hosting of Dr. Irene Carr on the topic of autoimmunity tonight. I'm so excited to have her here. We've been working together, gosh, for how long now? Probably going on a year? Uh-oh, you're muted. Hang on, technicalities.
Oh, yeah. Not the first, won't be the last.
No, so this is humor. We're all human, so we're going to keep it light
Oh, for
tonight.
sure. Right on. Right on. Yeah. So no, we've been working together almost a year.
And it's been amazing. I mean, Irene Carr is a physician. She's got nearly 25 years of experience in regards to professional practice. And personally, 50 years of experience, which that matters, believe me, I understand. And she's constantly seeking innovative ways to support healing and well-being. She marries cutting-edge research with wisdom because it's all about clinical experience. Like, how does one person react and respond? And very passionate about healing and well-being holistically, dedicated to delivering medicine in a compassionate manner. And that's one thing that I really adore about Dr. Carr, is she is so human, just understands every element of how we live our lives, what's realistic for each person, and really meets us wherever we are. And if you want to see her in her daily life, you could observe her cooking, walking her dogs, or meditating. And it's with great pleasure. I introduced Irene Carr, and before I turn over the screen to Dr. Carr, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this event so that people who weren't able to attend can watch that after the point, or if you feel it's really beneficial and you know somebody else that could benefit, absolutely share it with them. So I'll share the link to YouTube tomorrow. I'll send you all an email again. Some of you did not get the email yesterday that I sent with this link. So if you don't get the email tomorrow, reach out to me one-on-one and I'll make sure you get that link. And so if you want to rename yourself so that you don't have your full name on screen, feel free to do so. The other component is that Dr. Carr will utilize the chat feature periodically throughout her talk just to engage the audience and the participants here. And then at the end, that's how we'll work with the discussion, is we'll use the chat feature to put in your questions or concerns or things that you would like to discuss with Dr. Carr at the end. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yay, I'm the host now.
Yay! Perfect. Perfect.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful and so grateful for Cindy too. It's just such an honor and a pleasure to be invited into her community. I am going to just start by sharing my screen here. Great. And so before I really dig in, I always like to just start with a few arrival breaths or gathering breaths, I like to call them. And so finding yourself sitting in a posture that supports ease in your body, comfort in your body. The eyes can stay open or you can close them however you like. And just starting to notice breathing. And when you inhale, noticing just what that experience is in your body. 1/2 breath, inhale. And then that half breath, exhale. What is the experience in the body? Inhaling, experiencing the inhalation. And sometimes people feel that more in the belly, sometimes at the nostrils, and then exhaling, experiencing whatever you're experiencing, not making it right or wrong, good or bad, not trying to fix it or make it different than what it is. And one more time at your own pace. Inhaling, aware, experiencing that half breath in, and then exhaling and experiencing that half breath out. And then if you closed your eyes, I'll just invite you to open them. And once again, just finding ourselves in a seat or a posture that supports our comfort. So I name this presentation The Hope and Opportunities of Autoimmunity, which I think is so true for me and maybe others of you who have been on the autoimmune journey. Before we really dig in, I'm just wondering if people would share in the chat if you know you have an autoimmune condition, if you know somebody who has an autoimmune condition, or maybe you suspect you have an autoimmune condition. Just share if it's in your join the chat. Yeah, so definitely. So a few people with Hashimoto's, a person with subclinical hypothyroidism, a person with rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah, definitely. So a lot going on here. Psoriasis, for sure. So there are about 100 recognized autoimmune conditions. And some examples, as we've already named, the Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, but also lupus, very common, vitiligo, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, are some of the other common autoimmune conditions. Behind heart disease and cancer, autoimmunity is now the third leading category of disease in the United States. It's a condition where one's own immune system mistakes one's own body tissue as foreign. So it's a stranger danger. The classic symptoms of inflammation, which accompany autoimmunity, are redness, pain, swelling, heat, and loss of function. So symptoms can include a variety of nonspecific issues, so joint pain, fatigue, hair loss or thinning, brain fog, changes in digestion, changes in our skin, changes in our mood, even like unexplained low-grade fevers, dizziness. Some of the symptoms of autoimmunity are specific to the area that they're impacted. For instance, psoriasis tends to impact, the elbows, the knees, with skin changes. Rheumatoid arthritis obviously impacts joints, and we get joint pain. Hypothyroidism with Hashimoto's and all of the other associated issues that go with Hashis. It's important to remember that autoimmunity is a spectrum. So anywhere from a few months to a few years, and maybe even up to a decade or two, sometimes for some people, they can have autoimmune antibodies detected in their blood and not have a clinical diagnosis of autoimmunity. Yet it's on the spectrum, right? So what differentiates somebody who has autoimmune antibodies? They may have some of the clinical symptoms of a particular condition associated with that particular autoimmune antibody, which I think we still have a ton yet to discover. But yet there's not enough to say, okay, you definitely have lupus, you definitely have rheumatoid arthritis. What Western medicine does when autoimmune antibodies are detected, but there's not enough tissue destruction to call it a specific autoimmune condition, is basically they say, we'll follow you, there's nothing to do, which is absolutely the most insane answer, but we hear it all the time. For instance, the same happens with prediabetes. We get told like, yeah, blood sugar's not looking so good, but just wait, we'll keep following it. And when your number is above 126, then we'll prescribe a medicine for you. It's in this time frame before diagnosis, while the body does have some degree of abnormality that it's presenting with, to start to change, because we can really impact then the onset of autoimmunity. Maybe we can delay it or for a long time, or maybe we can end up making it less severe. With type 2 diabetes, we know for sure that diet and lifestyle can actually reverse the condition. So remembering that this is a spectrum. Also, diet and lifestyle issues can impact flares and impact remission. And it's also important to remember that the severity of the condition can vary. So some people have an unrelenting autoimmune condition where it just seems like they're trying every avenue and nothing is really making the system quiet down, where others seem to somehow be able to just do whatever they like, maybe take a little medicine and live a pretty normal life. So there's a whole wide variety for sure. It does have a predisposition for women. So actually, out of all autoimmune cases, about 80% affect women. And in a woman's lifetime, about 25% of us can expect to be diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Right now, there's estimated about 80 million Americans with an autoimmune condition. And this is just such a scary fact. In one generation, the prevalence of autoimmunity has increased from 1 in 400 people to 1 in 5 people. And there are some reasons that we will talk about. I'm going to come back to the female predisposition. And some of the reasons why that may be the case, that women seem to get autoimmunity at a much higher rate than men, is one, our exposure. We are exposed to a ton more chemicals, mostly in personal hygiene products. Makeup is notorious for all kinds of additives that can be immune triggering. Also, women still do the majority of household cleaning, and a lot of times there are a whole bunch of chemicals that we're exposed to in cleaning agents that can be immune triggering. Also, from a reproductive standpoint, in an evolutionary sense, like reproduction being the key event, that it's been proposed that women seem to have a more aggressive immune system and a less tolerant immune system. And then lastly, for some autoimmune conditions, this seems to be true, which is there is variation in how somebody with lupus, for instance, metabolizes estrogen. And so there are 3 different ways that the body will break down estrogen. And this next slide just shows that. I know it's kind of a busy slide, but hang in there with me. On the top, kind of mid to right, you'll see that there is a dial, and below it says estrone, which is just a type of estrogen in the body. Next to it is estradiol, and then lastly, estriol. But under the estrone, and all 3 types of estrogen undergo the same metabolism, you'll see the green arrow going to the 2-OH pathway. the red arrow to the 4-OH, and then the blue arrow to the 16-OH. The preferred pathway for estrogen metabolism is 2-OH. And people with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and multiple sclerosis tend to favor the 4-OH pathway, which is not favored simply because it produces a reactive intermediate product. And if the body doesn't have the ability to break that down, that intermediate reactive product can bind to DNA and cause damage to the DNA. So if you, like as a clinician, as a functional medicine practitioner, if I had somebody come in with either 3 of those conditions, one thing I may recommend, especially if they're not responding to some of the usual therapies, is look at how they are metabolizing their estrogen, because that may be something we can address. And actually, most of the time it can be addressed fairly simply. One way to shift from the 4-OH to the 2-OH is actually incorporating more of the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. And so it's remembering that food is medicine. There are basically 5 different types of responses that can arise out of our immune system. We all hope for that balanced response, which really entails that we are presented with either some type of physical trauma, a cut, or maybe some type of pathogen, so bacteria, and our body mounts an immune response. But about the same time it mounts that immune response to take care of the situation, it's mounting a counter response to shut things down, because we want a limited amount of inflammation, right? And so basically when we get a balanced response, we don't get sick and our wounds heal beautifully in an appropriate amount of time. However, we can get an excess response, and an excess response to our environment can show up as allergies and, environmental hypersensitivities. So like being hypersensitive to fragrances or different chemicals. An excess response internally can lead to autoimmunity. The body can also mount an insufficient immune response. And if that is done to something external, you'll see that you probably get an infection, or maybe you have delayed wound healing, something like that. Or maybe you have a non-healing wound. And then if you have an internal insufficient immune response, that is associated with the pathogenesis of cancer. So the 3 things, we call them the triad of autoimmunity, that are required for autoimmunity to develop. First is that there's some degree of genetic predisposition. And I want to make it clear, we do not inherit diseases. We inherit susceptibilities to diseases. Big difference. So that means you have the power to change your genes, essentially, right? The second thing is increased intestinal permeability, which is also known as leaky gut. And I'll explain why leaky gut is part of the pathogenesis of autoimmunity. And then the third is the exposome. So what we do on a daily basis, bathes our cells in things that are either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And so we really are at choice once we bring some awareness to our choices at what are we bringing in? Are we, bringing in healthy relationships? Are we getting appropriate sleep and guarding our sleep? Are we managing our stress? Are we unduly exposing ourselves to things in the environment like chemicals, maybe makeup, making different makeup choices, etc.? This is what a leaky gut looks like on the right. Excuse me. On the left, you can see what a normal healthy gut looks like. So we are seeing noted normal tight junctions. And so normally the cells that line the gut, the intestines, are nice and close together, and they have modulating connections called tight junctions. But when there's inflammation present, which can be because of different food substances or stress, or maybe we're not breaking our food down well enough, that's causing irritation. Maybe we have an imbalance in the normal microbiome or gut bacteria that's causing inflammation. So lots of different reasons why the inflammation can be there. But then we lose those tight junctions. And so there's space between the lining of the gut cells. And then things that shouldn't be getting through are getting through. And the reason why it's important to know that things are getting through that shouldn't is about 70% of our immune system exists in that layer below the lining of the gut. So about 70% of the immune system lies in the gut. And so if we're poking it all the time because of the things that are getting through that shouldn't be getting through, we're really causing an upregulation and overreactive immune system. Increased intestinal permeability can arise, like I said, from a whole host of different things, from foods, stress, sleep deprivation, believe it or not, unfortunately, like less than 6 hours per night causes changes in the intestinal permeability. Also, it's important to note that sometimes exposure to different toxins, nutritional insufficiencies, injuries like traumatic brain injury results in a leaky gut, and so can some common medications like ibuprofen. This increased intestinal permeability leads to malabsorption of nutrients, malnutrition. It also increases uptake of different substances, different toxins that then poke at the immune system and upregulate it. And that can ultimately lead to allergies, autoimmune conditions, and other systemic problems. It's important to appreciate inflammation. Again, inflammation is the body's normal response to defend us against microorganisms or pathogens, and also to help us repair. It's only when inflammation becomes chronic that it becomes a problem. And there are two main mechanisms by which chronic inflammation happens. One is that there is some loss of the ability to shut down the immune response. The second is that it keeps getting poked and triggered. Okay. Most chronic diseases have an underlying pathogenesis of inflammation or are linked to excessive chronic inflammation. And it's important to remember that inflammation can be definitely dampened and significantly altered by reducing triggers and modulating diet and lifestyle. It's so humbling as a practitioner to just always recognize what worked in one patient may not work in another patient. So each person's Hashimoto's is unique to them. It's like an individual disease condition, for instance. So we can't, separate the condition from the person in which it arose. Super duper important. And functional medicine is all about delivering a personalized approach and finding out, what are the particular triggers for an individual? What are the particular healing mechanisms for an individual? And that we always address in functional medicine some essential questions. We don't just look at what's going on right now. We also take a view of even all the way back to before you were born. So what was happening in your mother's system while you were in the womb? Was she adequately nourished? Was she stressed out? What kind of things were going on in her life really do impact the fetus, okay? And then there's early childhood, mid-childhood, on up, and we'll see an example of that coming up. Different things, whether we had a lot of sugar as a young person, whether we had a lot of antibiotics as a young person, whether we took a lot of over-the-counter meds like antacids, or I mentioned earlier ibuprofen. Those things all have an impact on our system. And then there are triggers. So these tend to be one or a few events within a short period of time that preceded the diagnosis. And so we sort these out. And then mediators. So what kind of things are still present that might be, inflaming the immune system, activating it? This is what we call the functional medicine timeline. And whether this is done formally with a patient or in the background, trust me, it's always being done when you see a functional medicine practitioner. And you can see here in the far left, the antecedent here, the history, the father has ulcerative colitis. You can see from ages 1 until 15, this person had a whole bunch of infectious processes, ear infections, sinusitis, bronchitis, and then above that timeline, you can see she was treated with antibiotics. And then she got married around age 19. Also about the same time, she's having recurrent yeast infections, which also gives us some information about how the immune system is functioning. She had her 2 children, one at 23, one at 27. And then she goes on to the diagnosis at age 34 of lupus. But right before that, there were a whole number of triggering events. Like she was involved in a car accident, her father was involved in a car accident, her dog ran away. We'll see it here in the functional medicine matrix. Again, this might happen behind the scene, but again, every functional medicine practitioner is doing some form of this. But you can see how under modifiable personal lifestyle factors in the bottom, there's stress and just says, low level life stress, but then she had a motor vehicle accident, father with motor vehicle accident, dog ran off, and then they all just kind of accumulated, and then she got the diagnosis of lupus. We really use this form to put together a schematic, if you will, of a whole patient. Like we're not just looking at one thing, we're looking at the patient in total. And as I mentioned, we're looking at antecedents, triggers, mediators, because we need to address those. We are also looking at the modifiable personal lifestyle factors along the bottom, being sleep, relaxation, exercise, movement, nutrition, stress, and relationship. The thing that's so cool that I love about the modifiable personal lifestyle factors is, again, they can be anti-inflammatory. And then the main part of this matrix looks at where else within this person's body is she having difficulty. And so you can see under assimilation that she's got some issue, and this would be like digestion. So she's got evidence of dysbiosis, so an imbalance in the intestinal microbiome. Structural integrity plays a huge role, like what's going on with our skeletal system, what's going on with our muscles. Communication, transport, or circulation, biotransformation and elimination, super duper important. Can we break down the things that are coming into our body and eliminate them appropriately? And the defense and repair really refers to the immune system. So again, back to the genome. So we inherit these genes. They're exposed to the environment externally, and then the things that we take in internally, either through smell, taste, sound or hearing, sight, touch, and then our mind too, right? The thing that I didn't mention on the matrix, I'm gonna go back, is in the center, in that white space is, you know, mental, what's going on in our mind, what's going on in our heart, emotional. And do we have any connection or sense of something greater than ourselves or spirituality? Those filter off and play a role in every aspect of our health. And those are also addressed by functional medicine practitioners in depth and considered extremely important. And part of our mental, emotional, and spiritual health is part of our exposome. And then I also want to just mention this concept of hormesis. And I call it the Goldilocks principle. I don't remember where I got that from, but it's not original. And so anyway, there is a therapeutic dose of everything, therapeutic dose of exercise, a therapeutic dose of food, a therapeutic dose of relationship, but it's unique to the individual. And the other thing is it changes over time. And we do need a little bit of stress on the system. And actually, like, if we're getting the right amount of exercise, it can improve our energy production. If we're getting too much, it just wipes us out. So it's important to always keep in mind, like, what is the therapeutic dose for me at this time, and knowing like it's going to change. I like to remind everyone that I work with that balance is not an end point. It's not like we arrive. Hopefully, balance becomes this subtle conversation. So we're not, way overdoing it, way underdoing it. Rather, we're on this like little micro teeter-totter. Okay. I put this slide in here just to remind me and everybody else that one thing impacts everything. And so this slide represents if somebody has gluten sensitivity, how that can become an antecedent trigger mediator, how it can impact our structural integrity, our digestion, our immune system, our energy production, and so on. And the good news is if you're a gluten sensitive person, if you take that out of your diet, like, you are impacting all of those areas by that one little thing. And I know I shouldn't say one little thing. I've been without gluten for over 12 years, so maybe it's little now, but I promised you it wasn't before. My favorite food until I turned 40 and got the diagnosis of Hashimoto's was pizza. I still actually consider it my favorite food, although obviously I haven't had it in over a decade. So how do we start to address in functional medicine and resolve inflammation? First of all, we want to look for hidden infections. Dysbiosis is probably the most common, although there can be others. Also, it's surprising how often we can find somebody who has a new onset autoimmune condition, and we test for celiac disease and they're positive. Other things that may get tested for either early on, depending on a patient's history, or later, are things like heavy metals. So when I speak of heavy metals, I'm speaking to like mercury and lead, arsenic, And you might think, where do I get some of these things? Well, unfortunately, Mercury has lots of different potential sources, but we want to look. Obviously, we're going to talk about sleep, and is it appropriate timing, because there are circadian rhythms that we want to honor. Also, like, what is the architecture of the sleep? We know that there are normal sleep stages, 1 through 4, in REM sleep. Is a patient getting adequate amounts of each of those? How do they feel when they wake up, refreshed or not? Are there several animals sleeping with them at night, disrupting their sleep? So all things that we address around sleep. And I also want to put a plug in here for rest. So rest being defined as the art of doing nothing. And I'm so not good at this one. And I see it all the time in myself. So I have a little bio analysis device. And on the days where I don't take little breaks and do nothing, my heart rate variability, which is an indicator of my overall well-being that day, takes a dive. But in the days that I've rested, like, it's robust. And so it's, why I need a little bio analysis device to help me stay honest about how much activity I am doing. I don't know, but that's a whole nother pathology. But just to know, like, yeah, it makes a difference. We want to make sure that we're getting appropriate nutrition for our bodies. And then again, this is unique to the person. There are some basic principles, like we all need fats, we all need proteins, we all need carbohydrates, but to what degree and which elements within those categories? And also with nutrition, I'll just say one other thing. So something, for some people, they have increased needs of certain elements like vitamin D because of what's called a genetic SNP. And so sometimes we uncover those types of things when we are assessing patients and helping them come back to a state of balance. As I said, movement, exercise, we want to have that be appropriate for the individual. We're hoping to support them in having caring, safe relationships, and then just, modulating our stress. And I only put a few things there, but I would say, like, practice of gratitude journaling cannot be overstated. I think gratitude is an absolute superpower. Being honest, like, we all need help. It's not easy being human. So getting a counselor or a life coach or a health coach on this journey, making change is not easy. I mean, having 10, 20, 50 years of habitual patterns of behavior and then being asked to start to do something different, it's not easy. And having somebody there to help sort through that is really priceless. Yoga or some type of gentle movement, time in nature, again, priceless. I would also say pet therapy, and I'll put a plug in for dogs just because I'm a super duper big dog lover. And I'm just so grateful for my dogs. I've always had dogs in my life, even in the worst times in my life. I had dogs, and I'm so grateful for that because, one, they're, for the most part, they're automatic treadmills. Like, if you don't keep your dog exercise, there's not any peace in your house. But they would get me outside at all kinds of hours. And, in the dead of winter, when I was living in Duluth, Minnesota, at 10 o'clock at night, I would be walking the dogs if that's what needed to happen. And I would see so many shooting stars, and it was so beautiful and so healing to my mind and my body. And then also for modulation of stress, meditation. And I'm just going to ask you to, I'm going to do a 3-minute guided meditation, because I often hear that people say, like, I can't meditate. And I understand that. I've been on the journey myself. So if this is something you'd like to do for the next 3 minutes with me, feel free. If it's not something you want to do, I just ask that you give space for it. There's no trick to meditating. Really, it's more of a process of letting go. And so just find a comfortable position, one that supports ease in the body. Eyes can stay open, but placed at a soft gaze, or you may close the eyes, whatever feels best to you. And just feel what it's like, experience what it's like to sit in your body at this time. Maybe you can feel your feet touching the ground. Maybe you can feel the buttocks touching the chair. Perhaps you can feel the clothing touching the body. Perhaps you can hear sounds, the sound of my voice or something in the house or neighborhood. Maybe you can smell something, just noticing that. And then once again, just bringing your attention to the experience of the in-breath. And then the experience of the out-breath. Continuing to breathe, just being aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. Perhaps noticing how the in-breath changes, how it's different each time, and how the out-breath is different each time. But without trying to control it, fix it, change it, manipulate it, judge it, just being aware of it. What is the experience of breathing in? And what is the experience of breathing out? There's no right way, there's no wrong way. You may notice thoughts arise, and that's just the nature of the mind. It's the nature of the mind to think. It's the habit of the mind to want to control, fix, change, run off into a different direction. But bring your attention back to what is the experience in the body of the inhalation. What is the experience in the body of the exhalation? One more time, what is the experience of the body with inhalation? And what's the experience of the body upon exhalation? And then when you're ready, if your eyes were closed, you can go ahead and open them again. I love meditation. I can't say that I'm good at it. I can't say that I've always loved it. But something told me when I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, there wasn't a lot that I could do, but this was something I could do. And so I just really committed to doing it. And I'm so grateful I did. I think some of the benefits of meditation are just like naturally feeling more calm and ease in the body. I would also say because it's a practice of persistence, like start again. Okay, I ran off with my thoughts, but this next breath I recognized I'm lost in thought. So I'm going to come back to what the experience of my in-breath is. And so it creates a place to practice being persistent. And once you get established, it's like any other habit. I typically, because just like everything else, if you don't do it in the beginning of the day in regards to movement and meditation, it seems like it gets lost. And now I feel like I am undressed if I don't do my meditation in the morning. Even if I can only squeak in a few minutes, like it's something that anchors my day. Books, I always say bookmarks my day. So I begin the day with it, I end the day with it. And it, again, like you said, meditation's more about letting go, that practice of letting go, which I think is so important. I put this next slide in here just to show, like, we're not just telling you to eat green leafy vegetables because we are narcissists or something like that, but they really have a purpose. And so along the top, you can see fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, and these are the macronutrients that get broke down and then made into energy in the body. But in order for them to get broke down and made into energy in the body, certain nutrients are needed. They're cofactors for the enzymatic biochemical reaction. And you can see here under fatty acids, magnesium and vitamin B2. And then on the lower right-hand side, you can see iron, B2, manganese, magnesium. And obviously iron, we always think of, beef, but there are other sources of iron. And leafy greens are a great source of B vitamins and magnesium. So they do serve a purpose in our bodies, super duper important. And then lastly, I'm just gonna say around autoimmunity that it is really a opportunity to reassess our lives, to determine what's important, to start to understand, like, what are we paying attention to and how are we paying attention to it, because it really matters. And when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I was super duper out of balance. Oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you how out of balance I was. And mostly I was just caught up in the hamster wheel of things, working way too hard, way too much, really disconnected from how I was feeling and what my heart wanted in my life. Definitely, like, there was no happiness, right? And all there was one goal after another goal after another goal. And definitely I was not putting any energy into maintaining healthy relationships. And so it was a big call, a really, really big call for me, really big opportunity for me to start to come in alignment. And again, it's not doing all of these things all at once because it's a process, but connecting to what really matters to us and starting to move in that direction. I love the analogy of, an airplane. If you move the aim just by a degree, like, a whole different destination arises. And that's basically all we're talking about here, shifting things a degree or two, and a whole new world opens up. So with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope that this has been helpful in some way, and I will let Cindy take back over to open up the discussion, and you can use the chat, I believe, at this time to ask any questions or just make any comments. Again, thank you.
Technical difficulties. Sorry.
No. All good, all good. Thank you.
3 hours later. So thank you so much, Irene. I mean, amazing information. So beneficial too to have the centering breath and the meditation. I would love to just open it up. We do have some time left in this hour. So if you would like to open your chat, and if you have any questions, anything you want to discuss, please ask that now. So I've got from Julie, have you found that doctors who practice Western medicine are more open to functional medicine ideas and are willing to work with functional medicine doctors?
So I think it varies. It varies a lot. And there are some that are, there's some that aren't. And I do think maybe one of the silver linings of COVID has been this realization, this more open discussion. Like there are things like post-viral syndrome, and it's clear that it's not just like diagnosing or naming a disease and matching a pill to it in long haulers COVID. Like, so I think like there's some, more openness because of COVID in the Western medical world, but I wouldn't say it's everybody. But I'm hopeful.
Yes, I'm hoping with time, right? So this is a perfect question. Paula, great information. How would I go about finding someone in my area who practices functional medicine? So I want to first have Dr. Carr share how you could connect with her. So it depends on where you live. So where she is legally licensed to practice and how she practices currently. And then we can also give you another resource to check.
Yeah, so I work for a telemedicine company called Vital Health, which I love. It's my favorite job ever. And
VYTAL.
Yes, VYTAL health.com. And I am licensed right now in California, North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and in the process of getting my Illinois state license. And so that could be one possibility. The other possibility is to do a functional medicine practitioner search online. But I would say maybe before doing that, I would go to the Institute of Functional Medicine, ifm.org, look for a practitioner there, because you're going to get somebody who is rigorously trained and tested to meet IFM certification standards, which are, I will vouch for, quite rigorous. But that would probably be the best place. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then another question from Maggie. Have you ever seen a patient with autoimmune who could tolerate gluten well? Is gluten always a trigger?
So yeah, so the reason why gluten is so potentially not good, even if you do not have a gluten sensitivity per se, is because there is increased intestinal permeability associated with gluten. And this isn't 100% of people all the time. Like there's not one of us on planet Earth that eat gluten that don't have some variation in their intestinal permeability. And so if you are an autoimmune person, even if you don't seem to have any sensitivity to gluten, or maybe you've done some in-depth food sensitivity tests and gluten's not one of your triggers, I personally would not be poking at my immune system with gluten. And I would say secondarily dairy. And they're both very pro-inflammatory dietary substances. And I know like that's so hard, but believe it or not, so I'm on the other side, like I said, for over a decade, been gluten and dairy free. And I don't miss it. At all. Like I love my diet. I love food. I'm a big foodie. And, my husband, we have gluten and dairy in the house because he partakes in it and it doesn't bother me at all. Not whatsoever. But again, like that's a process. That wasn't an overnight thing. That's been years in the making. But I also want to just say, like, working with Cindy, with a functional nutritionist, is super duper helpful when you start to make these changes. And then I'll put my favorite cookbook, if I can say that there's just one right now, which is written by Dr. Terry Walls. Dr. Walls is a patient and a physician. She was diagnosed with MS quite a number of years ago, was in a wheelchair, seriously in a wheelchair, and through nutrition and supplements, she was able to return to clinical practice and walk around and ride bike and do all kinds of normal things. But she has a cookbook out called The Walls Protocol for Cooking. And I think it's really excellent resource to kind of guide your eating journey with autoimmunity and other chronic conditions too.
Perfect. And then I think there was a tack on to the gluten question about, is a tiny speck of inadvertent gluten exposure as bad as eating a croissant? Does the amount matter?
So no, the amount doesn't matter. It's the bottom line, and we do our best. There are workarounds, because what's been shown is that gluten-free products and gluten-free advertised dishes at restaurant, when you test them, about 30% of them either have cross-reactant agents, cross-reactant to gluten, or they have gluten in them. So there are workaround enzymes that you can get. I'm always a little bit hesitant to tell people that, because they're not meant to be abused. It doesn't give you the right, and they're not meant to take care of like going and eating a croissant on purpose. They're really meant for those incidental exposures that you might get.
Exactly. And I would 100% agree with that. And that's what I will work with my clients on as well, is like when you really don't know about those potential cross-reacted kind of things that slip in or inadvertent. Another question, do you recommend a DIM supplement to support the intake of cruciferous vegetables?
So
I want to also tack onto that, Dr. Carr, about goitrogens, because I think a lot of people with Hashimoto's or thyroid dysfunction are concerned about the goitrogenic effect. So I'd love for you to kind of speak to both of those, if you would.
Right. So the goitrogenic potential has not been shown to be true. So, I mean, definitely, like if you're eating this much raw broccoli every day, which is going to make you feel horrible for other reasons, but just how we normal portion sizes of broccoli or Brussels sprouts, lightly cooked or steamed or whatever, totally fine to eat, and hashi's like not a problem, not a goitrogen issue at all. I do not I want to know what's going on from a genetic standpoint before I would recommend, I would never recommend DIM or NFR2 supplementation without knowing what your genomics are. I want to know what's going on, because we can upregulate certain parts of your detoxification system, but other parts might be not robust. And so, for instance, if we're upregulating phase 1 of your detoxification, but your phase 2 is kind of sluggish just because of your genetics, then I'm creating a whole world of hurt. So I would not just blindly take a DIN supplement or recommend a DIN supplement to somebody without knowing what their genetic SNPs are.
Great. Any other questions? All right, I think that was the last question that we had come up. So again, thank everybody for being here tonight, and thank you, Dr. Carr, for a wonderful presentation, just helping us understand the true prevalence, the root causes, and how we can manage our condition if it comes holistically. And so with that, I thank everyone, and thank you, Dr. Carr, and hope you all have a wonderful night. And I will share this post with everyone so that you can look at it, watch it again, share it with others that could also benefit. And I hope you all have a great evening and rest of your week.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cindy.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.